for another session from our Black History Month series. It's really exciting. My name's Natasha Sampson. I'm the Regional Strategic Lead for our local authority fostering South East, as we also call it LAFC, because that's quite a mouthful. And as you will know, for the month of October being Black History Month, we have been bringing you a series of events, online events, every Tuesday. So this is our fourth. No, is this our third? Fourth. This is our fourth. Gosh, we've only got one more week left next week. And James, we've had you before, but I'm going to ask you to do an introduction again, just in case there's anyone new on the call. But I have to say, your session last week on skin and hair care has had such fantastic feedback. So thank you very much. And for anybody that's watching this video, you will be able to see a copy of the skin and hair care video as well. But for this week, James is joining us to talk about. Over to you, James.
So for this week, we're going to be talking about cookery and food, which is a pleasure to talk about because it's a big part of my identity. It's a big part of what makes me who I am. So thank you very much for having me. Good to see you all. I'm just going to share my screen and then we will jump into it. I'm going to include sound. Right, Natasha, give me the thumbs up if you can see my screen right now. Good stuff. Okay, let's go into slideshow mode. Right, so thanks for that lovely introduction, Natasha. So I'm James Carbo. I'm from Replenish Culture CIC. My background is in children's services. So what I'll do is tell a little bit of the story of how Replenish came to be. So yeah, my sort of area of specialism is care experienced young people, working with foster carers. So I've done supervising social worker, assessing social worker. I'm very familiar with Form Fs and working with foster carers. And I must say, you know, I'm continue to be blown away by the work foster carers do. I think it's such a gift to be able to sort of welcome a child into your home and your family setting and provide that stability for them. So Replenish Culture really was born out of the time where I was managing the fostering team at Camden Council. And 2020 happened and lots of things happened in 2020. But one of the sort of pertinent things that was happening was the sort of rising Black Lives Matter movement. And that really gave rise to a lot of conversations at the council around how we could do better for staff, but really as well how we could be a better corporate parent to our global majority children. At Camden, we have about 80% of our looked after population is Black or mixed heritage. So actually, the large majority of the children we care for are from diverse backgrounds. And one of the areas where we were really coming unstuck actually was around hair care and skincare. And there just not being enough provision for foster carers in that space. You know, it's you don't know what you don't know. And we found that birth parents were beginning to complain about the sort of physical presentation of children at contact. It was something that staff was picking up on as well. And we decided to put together a box where we included hair care products, skincare products, brushes, combs, bonnets, do-rags, and it was just really well received by the carers. But I suppose the bigger thing was actually it served as a prompt into the bigger conversation around identity, what it means to be Black, what it means to be Black and in care. And we've been on a real journey with it so far, which is, you know, going around to other local authorities, sharing our learning. We set up a CIC, which is kind of giving us a bit of freedom to do that. So it's been a wonderful journey. And today we are kind of stepping outside of our lane a little bit and touching on food and cookery, which is a big part of identity. And, you know, I did a lot of reflecting in preparation for this session, and I was just thinking about the power of food, really. What does it mean beyond meeting the practical need of kind of nourishing myself and filling a hole in my belly? And actually, it's been a great unifier. It's been a great connector. It's been a very grounding aspect of life. Food gives us many opportunities. It gives us the opportunity to learn more about other cultures. It is a history lesson. It's a geographical lesson. It's a lesson in social economics. And I just think it's really important that we take a moment to think about food, the food we eat, the food we prepare, but also how we eat, what it symbolizes for us. So that really is what we're going to dive into today. I want to say a couple of things about how the session is going to run today. So, we want it to be an interactive session. We want you to ask questions and to be forthcoming. We want this to be a safe space and a space where we can get into maybe more tricky themes. I'm just thinking, Natasha, if there's anything else around that contracting that we need to add at this stage.
I just, as we said last week, wherever we're talking about issues around race and culture, it can be a really sensitive subject, and sometimes people can feel hesitant to ask questions because they're not certain if they're using the right terminology. And just an encouragement, really, that this is very much a shared learning space. We're all on a journey, and actually, please don't feel afraid of what you might, whether you're saying it whether you're saying something in the right way or not. And likewise, if then somebody gives a bit of supportive encouragement for the way that something's been phrased, then we will take it in the spirit that it was intended in terms of learning. So please do feel free to speak and to share.
Excellent.
Thanks,
Thank you
Jane.
very much. Brilliant. So let's start with looking at some of the benefits of cooking with young people. Obviously, it's a very creative aspect. There's a lot of sensory elements to it. It really does build on those fine motor skills. It's an opportunity to really build some life skills. We know that looked after young people can struggle sometimes going out into the real world. And these life skills are really important, like being able to boil an egg or make some scrambled eggs on toast. These are really, really important life skills for them. Um, it builds confidence. Obviously, the nutrition aspect is huge at the moment. There's a lot of conversation at the moment around healthy eating, processed foods, ultra processed foods. Actually, that education all starts at home in terms of how to make a healthy, balanced meal. Um, it's bonding time. I think some of the most precious memories I have, actually, childhood memories, are of like baking with my mum in the kitchen, or being in there while she was cooking up some stew. And actually, she's given me a rundown of how her mum taught her how to make that particular dish and what it means, why we use particular ingredients. All of that is about heritage. All of that is about passing down. It's about that kind of family rituals. And we know that for children who have been in care, there can be large gaps in terms of um, their ability to have such experiences. They could have been in several placements where these sort of connecting moments just haven't happened on a consistent basis. So it's really important that we're proactive about that. Even things like math skills. So, just weighing up some flour on the scales, it's an opportunity to check in around their ability there. So again, that real confidence boost as well. So I'm going to play a very short video now that really just touches on how food connects us and builds on some of the things I've started speaking about today. Natasha, if you could just give me the thumbs up if the sound plays okay.
I firmly believe that how and what we eat is who we are. I think it was Bertrand Russell who said there is no more sincere love than the love of food.
I think that, to me, food is a looking glass into that culture. Wherever you're at, whatever country or city or even neighborhood in the States that you're in, to understand where the locals eat, to go and try that, read the menu, go to the market, you really understand who those people are.
The drive towards taste and flavour is the elemental part of us, because anyone who's seen a newborn baby knows that the first thing after breathing the baby wants to do is feed. So it's who we are, and it's absolutely can't be separated. And I think that that's why we have slightly separate tastes. We like certain different foods, which is why eating the food of someone else's childhood can be fabulously exciting, because everyone has a different truth, just like everyone has a slightly different personality.
In the best way, food can connect us and tell a story about why we eat the way we eat. And you want to invite a friend into that conversation and that dinner, and in a prideful way saying, hey, we eat this part and we cut our meat this way. Isn't that great? You know?
Food has that common denominator that allows us to slow down and enjoy life and smell the coffee, so to say.
We're all original, and yet we share so much. So food is the one common language. It doesn't matter with you when you speak. You speak French, you speak German, you speak Chinese. The one common language we have is food, and that connects us all.
So I'm just going to pause it there and invite you all to just share any sort of early reflections you might have around food, around eating, anything that's coming up for you so far.
So Natalie put something in the chat, James. Natalie, would you like to share it, or shall I read it for you?
Hello, sorry, I'll show my face as well. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it just really resonates for me when I think about my grandparents who are sadly no longer with us. Like my grandmother, she was just the best baker, and when I think of her, the first thing I think of is her amazing lemon meringue pie, and the sensory element of it as well. Like, you just brings you straight back to the smells that you smell, and just that warmth and that feeling it gives you, and just how it connects you through the generations as well, doesn't it? And I think it's just so powerful, I think, on so many levels. And then I look at the Caribbean side of my family, and for them, that sort of the combination of celebration aspects, but even whether we're having a funeral and getting together, and everyone sort of joins in and bringing different dishes and different aspects of, depending on which Caribbean island they're from. So I just think it's just very powerful, and just such a lovely way to connect us together, and, like I say, really sort of build on those relationships. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Natalie. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's so powerful, food, and like you said, it's about passing down those stories through generations. A real opportunity. And when you said about just the smells and how nostalgic it can be, it really can be a trip down memory lane. Just smelling certain things can make you think of maybe lost loved ones, really, really precious kind of early moments. So yeah. Thanks a lot for sharing. Any other comments, questions? I know we've had some stuff coming into the chat as well. Nikki.
I was just going to say, like, following on from what was just said, but around those connections, like, I have quite a tricky relationship with my dad who lives in the States, but actually we both share a love of cooking and food, and so swapping recipes, and even like before he moved to the States when I was only like 10 or 11, but he always used to make like carbonara, and it's like one of those things that when my daughter's just gone off to uni, I was like, oh, you need a recipe for carbonara, and it's just that, like, yeah, I think it's that connecting family that's so important, isn't it?
Absolutely. Hugely significant. These are all part of our identity, and it's what makes us who we are. Thank you for sharing. Judy.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know, because you might be interested. They've got an 8-month-old here covered in enjoying his lunch. He's got avocado on his forehead, and I made hummus because he really likes homemade hummus, which is really nutritious. I think it's got like protein and everything, and homemade bread roll. And this is his first food, and he's half Polish and half, I think, half Eritrean. Nobody's 100% sure, but yeah, just wanted to let you know that there's a little baby here, really, really enjoying his lunch.
It's amazing. Thank you for sharing. It's always fascinating watching, little babies and toddlers, when they have their first meal, and how they enjoy like putting it in their hair and putting it on their head, and it's that real kind of.
It's really nice seeing their development from like the very first time they have something, and and also when they've come from a different background to you, and you try a few different things from both sides of their heritage. It's really, but it was just what you were saying about enjoying food and stuff just was making me think about him right now. That's all.
No, thank you for sharing. Natasha.
That's all about you, baby.
Yeah, I was thinking about what the importance of food and to our cultural identity, and prompted by something that Maria had said in the chat. Maria, I don't know if you wanted to expound upon it after I speak, but being someone that's actually mixed heritage, I grew up in a very kind of, I think, culturally quite an English um, culture. So we lots of kind of egg and chips, roast dinners on a Sunday, and didn't have as much of the Caribbean side until I got into my teenage years, and then in my early adult years when I traveled across Africa. And we had to learn to adapt. I think my taste buds have changed a lot now, so I generally don't eat food unless it's got quite a bit of spice and stuff in it. But as a child who was used to eating lots of kind of spaghetti bolognese, I think was probably the most spicy that we might have had. Occasionally we had some corned beef and rice, which is probably the most Caribbean dish that I can recall with any regularity. But otherwise, I found it really, like, I remember first eating fried plantain, which is actually now a staple in our house. But when I was younger, that taste, it just didn't. It I found it really difficult, and I think that there is so much to be said about the bonding and stuff of food, but food in and of itself does help to introduce you to culture and to identity, which is what I was thinking about when I see Maria's comment. Maria, would you like to expound upon what you put?
Of course, yeah. Thanks, James. Well, I'm Asian, so my dad's Indian, my mum's Filipino. I'm very close to my mum particularly, and when I went to university, I missed her like crazy. So I ended up eating rice a lot as comfort eating, but it reminded me of her so much, it made me feel better. So it really connects you to your loved ones, I think.
Yeah, that really resonates. Like for me, going to university was a big. I think it was a really profound moment where I realized that actually that home cooking meant a bit more than maybe what I thought it did. And I can remember like calling my mum sometimes and asking her to like do some batch cooking for me and bring it up to uni because I wasn't yet so evolved in my cooking where I could actually make those dishes. But actually, since I want to say becoming a parent, but probably it was a bit before that, I've really kind of gone on this mission to learn how to cook some of those cultural dishes. I've really kind of proactively done that, and YouTube has been a great resource for that. I think we're blessed now that like there's basically a video demonstration of like how to do everything, but actually still I find myself calling my mum and getting that nuance from her in terms of how much ingredients to use and how long to leave stuff on for. So it's a really sort of deep and profound part of us forming. um Cool. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm gonna move us on. But Natasha's just put in the chat, I went on a similar mission. There's very little I couldn't cook prior to disability. Yeah, thank you, Natasha. Do you want to say a bit more about that, or are you happy for us to move on?
I traveled the world. I just traveled extensively. And for me, part of learning about different cultures was in the food, was just in learning. But I had a real mission specifically to learn about the Caribbean and to learn about Africa because of my heritage. um and so now my husband, who is first generation Black British, who grew up with a lot more kind of Caribbean food, that was his staple, was very Caribbean. I couldn't get away with not knowing a lot about Caribbean food. But I'm a pescatarian. I don't eat meat. And in the Caribbean, that is still very unusual. And at the time when I became a pescatarian, I remember my dad saying to me, "What do you mean? Black people eat meat, man." And so it was quite an adjustment. But yeah, I've learned to cook a variety from vegan all the way up to carnivore land, even though I don't eat meat. And that was very interesting, learning how to cook meat dishes when you can't taste the food that you're preparing. But I'll leave it there.
Wow, that's incredible. It's a real journey. Okay, I am just going to jump back into this slide deck. So I think we've touched on this a bit. So food gives you an insight into history, and not just the dish itself, but actually the presentation of the food also tells a story. The rituals around the food, all of that is really, really pertinent. So, just simple things like um, we eat typically 3 meals a day here. In other cultures, you might only eat a big meal once a day. Um, those rituals are all about history and heritage, and it's just fascinating to understand, when you dig a bit deeper, the why around food. Really, really important. So as well, food shows values. There's a lot of value a culture can attach to different kinds of food. For example, some foods are eaten regularly, while some are eaten intermittently or even on special occasions. So think about a Christmas dinner. Think about, a roasted turkey. You probably only eat that once a year. Um, if you're religious, on Good Friday, you might have some fish. If you're Christian, so a lot of rituals that are attached to celebrations. We think about some of the rituals around Ramadan and Eid and how families come together. It's all just so fascinating. Um, so we got here also the kind of food that people in a culture eat tells what values they hold dear. For example, healthy food choices can indicate that they care deeply about their health and eat healthy food to preserve their health. So I did a little exercise in preparation for today. This is really personal to me. So I'm born in England, born in London. So I'm consider myself English. Um, my parents are from West Africa, from Sierra Leone, which is right on the coast. Neighboring countries are Liberia, Guinea. It's not too far from Ghana and Nigeria, which most people tend to know. So for me, it was interesting growing up because not everybody had heard of Sierra Leone or knew it. At the time I was growing up, it was quite difficult because there was a civil war going on in Sierra Leone, and I really have memories of that playing out in my childhood and what that meant for my parents, obviously being in England but having family in Sierra Leone. Um, so actually, in terms of my identity through food, it's a real fusion. In the top left here, we've got jollof rice and plantain. These were a staple in my house. Not something we eat every week, but definitely like if there was a party or like a special occasion, we would definitely have that. And it's probably up there in my probably top 5 favorite dishes ever. It's just really grounding for me. Whenever I eat it, it makes me think of home. It makes me think of my family. So yeah, it really means a lot to me. Um, The third image here is just plain white rice with a sort of tomato-based beef stew. Now that was a staple for me in my household growing up. We probably had that once a week. You'll find a lot in particularly West African households. Rice really is a staple food. It's something that you can batch cook. So what would typically happen is that my mum would cook at the beginning of the week, put some stuff in, in some Tupperwares, put it in the fridge, maybe sometimes even put it in the freezer, and that would last us for like a whole week. So this is really coming back to the rituals around, it wasn't a case of like cooking dinner every day. Sometimes it was like warming something that had been cooked on the weekend, and that was absolutely fine. And we got the fish and chips there. So this is about my British identity. And, on a Friday we would have a fish and chips and, had really lovely memories of that. We got a famous chip shop near us in Camden called Blue Sea. It's, really like top quality stuff. So yeah, I got great memories of that. And even now at home, sometimes on a Friday, we'll have a fish and chips. And then I've got pizza on there. So, this is European influence really, but um, just thinking about our favorite dishes and where they come from and a bit about, the geographical dimension and the historical dimension. Because when we eat those foods, we are connecting to all of those things, whether we realize it in that moment or not. So I wanted to just share this and urge you all to think about your own identities through food. What might be some of the key dishes that come to mind? What are some of the key rituals that come to mind? I might just pause it here and stop sharing and just invite any or somebody said in the chat, please could someone share a jollof rice recipe? Yes, I can definitely do that. But yeah, does it, anybody want to share anything attached to, just in terms of your own identities through food? Donna.
Hi, I'm happy to share. So, hi, I'm Jennifer. So, my family, I describe myself African origin, Guyanese parentage, and British born. And the reason I share that because Guyana, it has a number of different cultures within there. So we have from Africa, we have uh, pepper pot, which is made with cassava. And you spoke, James, about the history of that, and that was through slavery. They would use cassava to preserve the meat. In Guyana, we have a strong Asian community, so things like dal puri, roti are some of my favorites. We have a strong Chinese culture as well, so chow mein, and we have a strong Portuguese culture as well, so things like garlic pork. And my friends laugh at me because actually at Christmas, so one of the traditional foods for us in Guyana at Christmas is pepper pot and garlic pork, and we would have that for breakfast. And I, in all of my years, I've never had an English breakfast. That is my Christmas breakfast. Has to be garlic pork, pepper pot, and freshly baked bread. I lost mum 2 years ago, and before when we looked in the freezer, she'd actually made portions of garlic pork and pepper pot for us to keep us going because we hadn't actually we hadn't bothered. I'm nearly 60. We hadn't learned how to cook those foods. So I just wanted to share that in terms of how diverse, certainly for myself, my sort of love of different foods are.
Oh, that's beautiful to hear. Thank you, Jennifer. And that breakfast sounds amazing. I need you to send me a recipe for that so I can try it. Donna, you had your hand up. I think
we might have lost. Yeah.
Or maybe we've lost that.
Yeah, she's frozen. Her screen's frozen at the moment.
No worries at all. Okay, I will move us on. So I had some fun with preparing for this session today, and I challenged myself to cook something new. that Natasha's been dying to find out what it, what it is I cooked. So there was a change of plan, Natasha. I was going to do jollof rice, but I thought to myself, I've done that so many times. So sorry, Judy. I'll send you a recipe though. So what I did, I made some saltfish fritters. And I grew up in Camden, North London, and a lot of my best friends were from the Caribbean, from Jamaica, from Grenada. My best friend was from St. Lucia. So I was very, very close to Caribbean culture, and I could have had it actually on my identity through food. But I loved saltfish fritters. It's one of my favorite dishes from the Caribbean to eat. So I've done a pre-record of me making some saltfish fritters, and I'm just gonna play it now, okay? So bear with me. Hi everyone, I'm James Carver. I'm from Replenish Culture. Today we're going to be talking about cultural food, and we're going to make one of my favorite dishes actually, Jamaican saltfish fritters. Really, really tasty. So yeah, get ready to cook along and enjoy something really lovely to eat. So let's start with what's going to go into our fritters. So we got some flour here. We have one red bell pepper. Doesn't have to be red, can be any color, but I've just got a red one. We've got an onion, we've got some cloves of garlic, and we've got a Scotch bonnet pepper. And then here we have our different seasonings that's going to go into the mix. So we've got garlic granules, mixed herbs, black pepper, all-purpose seasoning, crushed chilies, and some jerk seasoning. We're just cutting up our onions. Put that in there. So this here is a Scotch bonnet pepper, very, very popular in Caribbean cooking. The idea is just to cut a few pieces just to cut a few pieces of the Scotch bonnet and add it to our mix. Not too much, but it depends on how spicy you like things. So we've got our 300 grams of flour here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add some seasoning to it now. So we'll start off with a bit of black pepper, and don't be shy, we don't want too much in there, but enough to give us some flavor. Next, we've got our jerk seasoning. So I'm just going to use the lid and say about that much. Sprinkle it over the top. Next, we've got some crushed chilies. Not too much. Some all-purpose seasoning. Same again, about that much. Sprinkle that over the top. A little bit of garlic granules. And finally, some mixed herbs. Right, so we've got our flour here with all our seasonings, and what we're going to do is just mix them all in and just get all of those flavors integrated into that flour. So what I'm going to do now is add my onions, peppers, and garlic and Scotch bonnet into that mix. Right, so we're making Jamaican saltfish fritters, but we're going to do it a bit differently because they didn't have any saltfish in the shop I went to today. So I picked up these. You can use cod for your fritters as well. I got this from Sainsbury's actually. So yeah, really easy to get hold of. What we're going to do is boil it for about 12 minutes and then we're going to shred it up. So what I've done is I've taken just a saucepan like this. I'm going to heat it up and then I'm going to put my cod in to boil for about 12 minutes. Right, so I've boiled my cod for about 12 minutes. What I've done now is I've emptied out all the water, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave it to sit for a bit just to cool down, because right now it's too hot to handle. So it's really important that we just set it aside, let it cool down, and then we'll flake it once it's nice and cool. Our cod has cooled down, we just set it aside. What I've done, I've taken a wooden spatula and I just prod the fish gently and it just comes apart really easily as it's been boiled. So we've got our onions, garlic, peppers, scotch bonnet in there. Now we can add our shredded fish. Okay, and give it a good mix. So we really want to get this all really well integrated. Okay. So I then added 1 cup of water to the mix, and you can see it's got a lovely, nice consistency to it. And what we're going to do is just continue mixing all that together. And our mix is ready, and this is how it looks. Right, so I've added my oil to a pan. We want it on a medium heat, and what we want is our oil to get really, really hot, and this way the fritters won't stick to the pan. So I'm going to leave it on a medium heat for 2 to 3 minutes for that oil to get really, really hot, and then we'll start adding our mix. We are now at the frying stage. What I've done, I've put some kitchen towel over a plate. I've got my oil nice and hot, and I'm going to do a test one. So what you want to do is just scoop out some. Don't be precious about the shape, and set it into the oil. Right, so my test saltfish fritter tasted really, really good, so I don't need to add anything more to my mix. So now I can get to adding some more to the frying pan. So I've got about 3 in here. One's kind of broken off a little bit, but that's fine. And yeah, all good. Right, so this right here is our finished product. As you can see, these cod fritters are looking amazing, lovely and golden and brown. I'm having them with a Thai sweet chili dip. Bon appetit. Okay, I saw at least 1 round of applause there, so I'll take that. That was really fun to do. It didn't take all that long. One reflection I had just as I was preparing it is that I didn't actually measure out my seasonings, and my partner was really commenting on that as I was doing it. She was like, "You need to tell people how much seasoning to put," and I said, "No, like in our cooking, we don't really measure the seasonings. We just do it by eye." And she's like, "Oh yeah, you've got a point. That's true." So again, these are the little nuances that some of cooking we just do, but we do for a reason sometimes. Natasha, you've got your hand up.
I remember somebody once saying that the only measurement you use, you keep shaking until you hear a voice from your ancestors in the past saying that's enough, and I think it's so true. It's because it's passed down from generation to generation. Usually you've watched someone else doing it, and so your taste buds tend to acclimate to what you were brought up with as a child, so you use that amount. And you could say to someone, use that same amount, but actually that wouldn't work for their taste buds. So for example, the Scotch bonnet, when you were saying, oh, you just take a bit off the bottom of it, I was thinking, well, you're not having saltfish fritters in my house because we would have used that whole Scotch bonnet. So it's such a personal thing, isn't it? You just test and see.
Absolutely. That's the
But well
the
done,
beauty
James. Well done. Can I just say though, you used a prime cut of cod. I mean, I think the majority of us might have used a slightly cheaper version. I mean, that looked like some serious prime piece of cod that you had there.
Well, only the best for you all. Only the best for you. The only regret is that you can't taste them, you see. So you have to take my word for it. They tasted really good. Jennifer.
Thanks. I just wanted to add one of the key things is that culturally how this could change. So I'm Guyanese. Some of my relatives are from Grenada, and put mashed potato in ours as well. So again, it's really, I think it's really important for us that when you're talking about food and cultures, that actually they might have a little bit of a different nuance. When we talk about rice and peas in Guyana, we would use rice and we would use black-eyed peas, whereas my Jamaican friends, my partner, he was absolutely horrified when we first met. Black-eyed peas, that's not rice and peas. You've got to use red kidney beans, So it's really important that people understand that when you say Caribbean, I was really pleased when you said Jamaican saltfish, because I've been sitting there going, that's not how you do saltfish. But you were very specific that was Jamaican way of doing saltfish. So again, for us for yourself as foster carers, I think it's really important that you just clarify some of those sort of details with your the children that you're caring for, in terms of, is this how your how your parents or your birth parents would do it. Thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant. I think it's a really important point. And it makes me think of the, historical debate about who does the best jollof rice. And the Nigerian jollof rice, or is it the Ghanaian jollof rice? Actually, it's neither. It comes from Gambia, or Senegalese does it a certain way. So these nuances are really, really important. They all speak to a story. They all speak to culture, tradition, a way of living, and a way of preparing food, a way of being. So it's all really important stuff. I think you heard a snippet of my daughter who came into the kitchen actually whilst I was preparing all of that, saying, "Can I help?" And I did let her help a little bit, but I kept her out of the recording. But yeah, it's just it's a great bonding activity. It really is a great bonding activity, and a chance to pass down some of that culture. Really, really special moments. And like I said, I can still really remember being in the kitchen with both of my parents, because my dad liked to cook as well. And he was a really good cook, actually, my dad. So yeah, I hold those memories really dearly. Um, so any further comments or questions around that?
James, just Donna's back on now. I know she was going to speak a bit earlier. Um, oh, I think she might be on a call though. Donna, are you back with us?
Not, no, not the new ones. They were sent yesterday. They were in the sent box
Perhaps on another
yesterday.
call. We'll try again in a moment.
Okay.
Cool. So I'm gonna move us on now. So I did two dishes. The second of which was some fried plantain. So I'm gonna play a very short video of me frying some plantain. Bear with me.
Plantain, James. Plantain.
Hey, listen, I referenced that in the video. Just sit tight, because I know it's a contentious one, isn't it? To check I included sound. Hi everyone. So for part 2 of this series, we're going to be exploring another one of my personal favorites, and it's the world famous plantain or plantain. Now that's a whole other webinar in itself, but it's a bit of a tomato situation, depending on where you are in the world. Some people say plantain, other people say plantain, both referring to the same thing. I've got two very different colored plantains here. One is super ripe. Unlike a banana, plantain has a much longer shelf life, so you can still cook it and eat it when it looks like this. and this one here is less ripe. So I'm going to be cooking both today just to show you the difference. I actually prefer the ripe ones. These are a staple in black households all across the world, really. Very popular in both Africa and the Caribbean, and a delicious sort of, it could be a side dish, it could be your main dish. Has a very lovely smell when it's fried. So yeah, join me as I get into it. So firstly, I just want to peel the skin off it. Already I'm smelling some of that lovely sweet smell coming through. Right, and I'm just going to peel it back like that. So once it's peeled, I'm just going to proceed to cut it. Now, I like to cut it in an almost diagonal sort of shape, but it's not something that you need to be too sort of precious about. Whatever shape you like, really. And this one's nice and soft, so the knife goes through really, really easily. I'm now going to peel my less ripe plantain, and you can notice already that the color inside there is more of a pale sort of color. It's a bit tougher in terms of the feel of it. I'm then going to just take my knife and do exactly the same. So my oil's nice and hot now. I've warmed it up, and I'm going to begin adding these in. It starts to sizzle straight away. So I'm going to fry all my really ripe ones first. And really what you want to do is just use the eye test. I'd say as a marker, probably about 2 minutes on each side. But we'll have a look, and when one side looks nice and golden, we'll just spin it round. So as they've been fried, we're just again putting them on a paper towel to get rid of the sort of excess oil, and then we'll let them sit for a bit. There's two ways of cooking plantain. You can deep fry them or you can shallow fry them. Today I've gone for the shallow fry option, but some people do prefer to deep fry. Right, so I've got my two bowls of plantain here. In my left hand, it's the very ripe plantain. In my right hand was the not so ripe plantain. You can see slight variation in the colors of them, but I'm just about to tuck in, and I'm sure they're both going to taste delicious. Thanks a lot, guys. See you soon. So a lesson in plantain or plantain, depending on how you're saying it. Bro, I'm just reading some of the comments. Nikki saying I've never eaten plantain in my life, but absolutely going to try making this for my family. You won't regret it. You will not regret it. It's a lovely food. Any comments or questions on that?
Just to say, James, that I think they also eat quite a lot of this in certain parts of South America as well, actually. Um, and call them different things. I did put in the chat, I didn't know whether we had anyone from West Africa on the call with us to give me the name. I know in Nigeria, particularly when it's really ripe like that, it's called something different, isn't it? Do you know what it's called? Is there anyone that would remember?
I don't know about Nigeria. I know in Ghana they have a dish called kelewele where they cut it really, really small. Again, when it's like the super ripe one, and they cut it really, really small and they put like some chili flakes on it.
Yeah, thank you. And then Jennifer's also just mentioned the second part of what I was going to say is that you can also boil it because frying is not great. And then Maria's put the planted chips in the chat, so I think we're getting a full mode of planting here.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. My partner reminded me after I spoke about the frying options. He did say, yeah, you can boil it as well. And yeah, I enjoy it boiled. It's really, really nice boiled as well. Um, cool stuff. So I just wanted to bring our focus round to thinking about care experience young people. And I have a question I want to put to you all. So, what are some of the potential challenges for care experienced young people when it comes to food and identity? Do is lift that off there, put it in the chat, stop sharing my screen, and just invite you all to think a bit about this. Hey, Natalie.
Hi. That's a very good question, isn't it? I think something actually someone mentioned earlier was just around the potential triggers that can arise for a young person within their birth family experiences. And again, sort of going back to the sort of sensory element of food and the smells. We know how much, just through smells and touch and tastes can really sort of you can really sort of revisit those experiences. So I guess being really mindful, isn't it, around the potential sort of negative impact of that, but equally on the flip side of that, actually also from what you shared, how significant it is really making sure that actually equally it can be very comforting as well to to make sure you're continuing to have those same foods and taste and exposure to your heritage when you're going through such a significant loss and not being with your birth family, and making sure then you have the exposure to that. So I think it's just being really mindful of both sides of that, really, isn't it? There's so much more. And then obviously it depends on the experience of neglect they've experienced and also the link to food with that as well. So yeah, it's a complex big picture to consider, I think.
Totally agree. I think we've spoken about food in mostly glowing terms today and really positive terms. But food can also be a source of pain. It can be a reminder of adversity, of neglect, of trauma. And it's really important that we keep an open mind that actually, even things like sitting around the table could be a triggering moment for a child. I can remember when I was managing the fostering team previously, there was one placement where the foster care had gone to great lengths to put on a Christmas meal, and we came back after Boxing Day, and she said, James, it was the worst Christmas ever. The young person kicked off, and I think later on when things settled down, they had a chat, and it was too overwhelming. They had never been sat at the table for that period of time with nothing to do, nowhere to go, and it was a difficult experience and a real learning moment for that particular foster carer. Natasha.
I was just thinking, when I was a foster carer, one of the situations I really recall was having a sibling group with Nigerian heritage. And when they had come to me, they were used to eating only Nigerian heritage foods. And so my supervising social worker had asked, are you making sure that you're giving them a choice of foods to eat? And of course, I was trying to do that, but because they hadn't been used to having pizza and chicken and chips and stuff, they wanted that every single day, and it wasn't a healthy or nutritious um, choice. And so I found myself often having to kind of have these conversations and to negotiate and try. But actually, for them, they wanted to try something other than the food that they were used to eating every single day, and that they hadn't been any variation. So I think sometimes there can be this assumption that if you have someone from the global majority, oh, they're going to want to have that cultural food. Let me go and learn how to. Or, somebody, you've got a friend coming around for dinner, so I'm going to try and cook jerk chicken because you can get jerk from a jar. But actually, they may not want to eat that. And so I think it's just to have a conversation. And actually, conversely, I mean, I would really love a friend to try and make those dishes. Although I confess, we very rarely buy anything from a Caribbean takeaway, for example, because my husband will critique it to the 11th, about how he could have done so much better. And so we just generally don't bother. But so there's lots of nuances and lots of conversation. And I would say for children that are in your care, I think involve them in the conversation. Have a conversation about what would you like to eat? What do you enjoy? And actually, even if you can, go to the shops together. A lot of our supermarkets now have a world food aisle that you can walk down and you can pick up together, and you can even, they may very well want to, as I did, learn to cook foods from totally different cultures that are just not related to where they've come from either, and you can watch YouTube together. But don't assume that because somebody has a particular heritage that they're even going to enjoy the food from that background.
I would agree. I think there's so much wisdom in that, Natasha. I think it's easy to make assumptions and to create a script in your mind about actually, what would be most beneficial for a young person. But there's, food, there's food associations as well, and there's, what does that food represent for that child? It's best to have that conversation, really. Nikki.
I think really just following on from that, it's a real shame that the foster carer we had here last week isn't, I don't think he's on the call, but he was talking about getting recipes from birth family and what that meant to the child they care for, having those kind of memories sparked. And I think he talked about the smells. It was more the smells of it cooking and the anticipation of the memories that triggered was really magical, I think. But like you say, Natasha, it's about involving that child and making sure that that's going to be a positive experience. Yeah. What I thought was really interesting, that comment in the chat about teaching children to cook. And I think especially when we're looking at a lot of our supported lodgings, young people are kind of unaccompanied asylum seeking young people. And I think that learning to cook is something that, I haven't really, thought through, is that, we might, as white foster carers or supported lodgings hosts, be going, oh, I'll take you to the shops and show you how to make spaghetti bolognese, as opposed to what would you like to cook, and like what do you remember eating when you were younger, or what did your grandparents cook, or like those memories.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Always good to check in around that and see what would be most helpful, I think. Natasha.
There's two things in the chat which I think are really, really important to read out, and then I wanted to have a reflection on one of them. Jennifer said many global majority children leave care and cannot cook food from their own culture, as they haven't been given the opportunity to cook in the carer's kitchen. And I think that's really important for those of us on the call, particularly for foster carers. Please ensure that your young people, that you are teaching them how to cook. That's part and parcel of our role as foster carers, but that you encourage them specifically to learn about, because it's part of our culture and our identity. And as we talked earlier, that's one of the things that we would ordinarily have passed down through generations. Which actually brings me on to something that Amy's put
Sorry,
in there.
Can I sorry, Natasha, just to add to that, I think it's really important to also to acknowledge that some of those foods may appear to be a bit smelly. So when you're cooking saltfish, that smells. Without a doubt, it really stinks out the house. When you're frying fish, it stinks out the house. So I think it's really important that doesn't that doesn't you're not making the child feel really like, oh my god, that smells disgusting. So I really just want to emphasize that as well, that some of those smells you just won't be used to smelling in your home. Thank you.
I think it's such a good point, actually. And I know we also have that in the office, don't we? Sometimes people bring in food from their cultural backgrounds and you can feel very othered, with people making inappropriate comments. I've had that as a as a landlord, believe it or not, I was called in. I had a HMO, so a house of multiple occupancy, and the tenants were arguing amongst themselves because one didn't like the smell of the other one's cooking. And I used to do a lot of consultancy work with sheltered housing for older people, and that was one of the things that kept on coming up that managers found really difficult to manage, because particularly the generation that were living there, they were not used to having the various different smells. What I found really interesting though is I think Brussels sprouts, and actually more so cabbage. Oh my goodness, cabbage can stink when you're cooking it, right? But yet there was always this thing about, oh no, not that food, but cabbage was all right. And I would use that as an example when I'm sharing with others, that it's about what you're acclimated to, it's what you're used to. So if you come home and actually you smell somebody cooking cabbage, you think, oh gosh, yeah, it's dinner time, because you know what's going to end up on the plate. So it's a really good point. Well made. Thank you, Jen. I just wanted to pick up on something that Amy had said in the chat, and that was, I had one foster carer who spoke to my mum about a recipe, and she completely refused to share it despite her son wanting it in the foster home. So sometimes families don't understand the significance either. And Amy, I just wanted to say that I think it's probably the significance is one of the reasons that mum doesn't want to share it, because actually that is such, as James talked about earlier, it's a bonding moment. This is more than just food. This is your culture, your identity, that heritage. It's passing it down. And it's not unusual, particularly in Black families, for someone to say, I'm not telling you the recipe. I don't want you to know how something's cooked, right? And what they'll say is, you sit and you enjoy my cooking, because that's the way that I'm communicating the love and the care and stuff to you, but this will forever be my secret, and I will then choose at which point I'm going to hand it down to you, and then you're going to keep it secret, and then you'll choose at one point to hand it down. So it's also, there are lots of nuances in there, but I just encourage you guys to remember that, to tread really carefully when talking to birth families about recipes, because that recipe may very well have been in the family, for example, for 4 generations. And this now becomes a reminder to that parent that they are not the ones able to cook with the child and to pass it down. So there's lots of things to think about from a trauma informed perspective. Sorry,
Wow.
James.
Yeah, no, I mean it's so true. It's so true. I was just reflecting back about, being a supervising social worker many moons ago, and really using food and hospitality as almost a way to gauge how welcoming a particular foster carer might be. So I always would joke with colleagues and say there's some foster carers who would never even offer you a cup of tea. And I had some other foster carers who, particularly actually the ones from global majority backgrounds, who would bring out a spread, and I had to say no, like I'm here to go through my report, and they're just feeding you. And I do think there is that cultural difference as well, in that for Black families, actually, how we show love, and you're absolutely right, Natasha, is often through feeding, it's through food and through being welcoming. And it just really reminds me of, what it might be like for a child going into a home where actually those norms around food are completely different, and how much of a culture shock that would be. And I think Natalie was touching on this. I'll just read your comment in the chat. Natalie said, it makes me think about how hard it must be for children moving to a new home and the impact this must have on their feeling of safety. And I wondered if you want to say a bit more about that.
Yeah, I just think, if I even think of my personal experiences of having family from different cultures, and when I first visited my Caribbean family, like when you sort of go back to that smell of food and the cooking, it's threaded throughout the whole home. It's in the, sofa smells, it's in the, it's just everywhere. It's just like you just sort of that sense you just get of it all and how different you feel in that environment. And initially for me as a young child, when it was new for me, I was a little bit unsettled, and it just felt very different from my home environment with my parents until I sort of got used to and adapted to that. So I'm thinking, for our children, if they've moved culturally to a very different home environment. And when I say culture, I mean that is many different levels, not just around race and ethnicity and country, but it makes you realize, doesn't actually, how much that food sort of threads throughout the home environment through those smells and on your clothes and when it's cooking and the noises that are made. And just how challenging that must be for children when everything just sounds and smells so different around them, and how much we need to be so perceptive of that, really, to think of ways to make them feel as emotionally safe as possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we know that that sense of safety is paramount, It's the foundation to everything. You can't go to school and learn efficiently if you're not feeling that sense of safety at home. So it's really, really important. Um, I'm reminded as well of another scenario we had one particular foster carer who was white, British, came from a working class background, and an older lady, and her whole thing was about microwave meals, and we were constantly in this sort of battle with her about, you know, why don't we see if we can do some cooking classes together, or I'll even come round and we can cook some basic dishes. And she just wouldn't budge from those microwave meals. And it turned out she used to take a lot of unaccompanied asylum seeking children, and it was always coming up as a bit of a sticking point. And I can remember we sent her on training courses, but the training courses are theoretical. And it was a real, I felt really stuck. We just couldn't move that along in terms of encouraging her to cook. So I do think it's probably an area where, as children's services, there probably could be some more creative innovations there in terms of, can we get shared kitchen space where we can, bring foster carers and do some sort of cook and learn together. But it can be really difficult. It can be really difficult. I'm just referring back to the chat. Yeah, yeah. I'm just reading Katrina, your comments really interesting about Turkish culture and Gatsby and everything. Again, it's very, very similar sort of stuff. I think as well, in a lot of black households, the kitchen really is the heartbeat of the house. That's like the main space. And it's funny because I can remember when I was living at home, and sometimes I'd go in the kitchen and cook, and my mum would always nosy in there and be like, what are you doing in here?" And I'm like, "I'm just cooking," but she would almost be quite protective over that space. And yeah, it really is the heartbeat of the house. And again, it's just that culture shock sometimes, maybe, of coming to a different space where that isn't the case, and how that must feel, is something that we should, stay tuned into. Nikki.
I think just saying that it made me wonder kind of about different cultural, or the cultural differences in terms of, like, for us, we all sit down and have a Sunday roast and we all sit at the table. Like, I've always made my kids, even they're like 21 and 18, but when they're home, we always sit at the table for dinner because it's the time of the day when you all catch up on each other's news. And when they're not here, my husband and I eat in front of the telly half the week. But but it's just that kind of, it's still that routine. And I wonder how different that is for different cultures, of whether it is all sitting down together. And yeah, like, and like you said about kind of how often in a day. I mean, when I was at university, there was a Nigerian guy I shared a house with, and he had the most enormous plate of mainly potatoes. It always seemed to be, but he ate once a day, and it was like the literally stuff falling off his plate. But he didn't eat all day, and then just had this huge meal in the evening. And I guess it's things like that, isn't it? The understanding and knowing that.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's so much nuance, and small significant details, I'll call them, that we can only really come to find out by being open, being humble, asking. I think travel is a great education, really, as well. Really immersing yourself in local culture. I make a point of, whenever I travel, trying to go to the local market, just to see how they relate to food, hear the sounds, smell some of those scents. It's a whole experience in itself, talking to the local people about food. Um, I think what I wanted to touch on as well is that in terms of healthy food and making sure that children have access to good levels of nutrition can feel like a minefield. And I think that there definitely is something about, trying to use single ingredient foods. I think, the plantain is a great example. It's not been processed, it's natural. You know, I think we in the Western world, a lot of the food we eat has come into contact with plastic. It's been sprayed with preservatives. It's been the key focus with a lot of our food is extending the shelf life so that more money can be made from it. And actually, when I think about the dishes that my parents cooked, the cultural dishes growing up, these were not processed foods. These were typically vegetables. They were things that come from the earth as well. And there's something really grounding about eating food that's from the earth that hasn't had too much sort of human interference with it. And these are the lessons that were passed to me through being close while those foods were being prepared as well. So I think there's the sort of having access to the cultural foods and knowing what to do, creating those opportunities. But there is something as well about how we educate young people on healthy food choices, vegetables, fruit, things that come from trees, things that come from the earth, things you could grow in your garden, perhaps. All of that is really important as well. Natasha.
I think, and actually, I'm thinking about fruit being such an easy thing for us to do. Try to find fruits, just a diverse range of fruits, because I know for me, when I go to down to the market in really diverse areas, I'm baffled at the various different fruits and stuff that are there. I can't name them. Even fruits that are well known in the Caribbean, sometimes I have to say to my husband, what's that? What does that, I don't have an idea. And actually, these are things that I think it's fun. Don't look at it as, because you can easily feel intimidated, I think, in those environments. It's just about your frame of reference, isn't it? And do you go there with the intention of just learning and let's try new things? I mean, my daughter not too long ago said that she wanted to try dragon fruit. Now, I have to tell you, I think it tastes foul. I couldn't tell you that before we tracked down the dragon fruit and bought her the dragon fruit, to which she also doesn't like the taste of dragon fruit. But it was important for us to get it. And I think if we can make a point in fostering households to try and just step out of our comfort zones a little bit and do that, not just because you've got a global majority child with you, actually do that for any child that you have with you, because we're responsible for bringing up well-rounded and culturally competent children and young people, and it's helpful irrespective of your background. And that could be a really fun activity to do as well when we're thinking about what to do during the summer holidays. How about we head to a particular market, that might be an hour's drive away from where we live, and with the express intention of buying as many individual fruits from different countries that we don't recognize. Um, yeah, I've given myself an idea. So that's something I might do with my children in half term as it comes up.
Natasha, you used to be able to buy kind of like a food, like a list of fruit and veg, and with like a chart that had like a green, amber, or red, so you could get your kids to try it, and then you decide, like you can vote on it, which whether you liked it or not. I don't know whether you can still get hold of those, but yeah.
Oh, well, you could even make something like that, couldn't you? I mean, that could be a nice little project to do on a rainy day in particular, because there are some, like I know not too far from where my mum lives, there is a Oriental City type, I think it might be called Oriental City or something like that. But you go in and there's like absolutely loads of different Asian shops, um, Southeast Asian shops. No, yeah, but anyway, you go in and you can pick and get just fruits from all over the world and different foods from all over the world. But that's indoors, so even on a really miserable rainy day, that's something that you could do. And I think children would really enjoy something like that, as well as the arts and crafts of building that chart, Nikki. I'm not really great with arts and crafts, I have to say, but hey, it doesn't need to look perfect, does it? And if you really want to be technological, you can do a Google form instead with voting preferences.
Brilliant. Dee?
Just on the theme of kind of like engaging kids in kind of this sort of stuff, I don't know if anyone's heard of like the wonky veg boxes. Yeah, so you can basically like sign up to have boxes of veg delivered to your door like on a weekly basis, and it's often kind of like offcuts that would have not made it into the supermarkets and things. And I'm just thinking sometimes that's a good way to kind of like engage in like, oh, what can we make with this? Because it's different what you get each week because it just depends on what's not gone to the supermarkets. So that could be a fun like activity to be like, okay, well we've got these things. What do you think we could do with them? And how about we try and find some recipes that are including of them and stuff like that? Just another thought.
It's a brilliant idea. That sounds really fun. And when we talk about those life skills, I think that's, being able to look in the fridge and see, one half chopped onion, a couple of eggs, and a few things in there, and be able to put a meal together, I think is really important. Nuria.
Yeah, hi. On the subject of food, and by the way, I enjoyed watching you cook. I was just thinking, it's obviously something really valuable for the carers to be able to engage the children and find some common ground and help the children, develop those independent skills and so on and so forth. But I'm an IRO, I'm a reviewing officer, was both for fostering, for looked after children. And as an IRO, I've cooked with the children myself, I've had kids where, I'm British, they're not British, and we agree, in this case, it was going to be Spanish food. So if I go with ingredients, they organize ingredients with a carer, and we all cooked the big, massive Spanish omelette. It was really difficult to turn it around. And we made a salad, and I brought, kind of pork meats, typical tapa stuff. And I have to say, we had a great time. Obviously, it had to be an extra visit, it's not something you could do in half an hour. And I knew the kids, so that was an advantage. But because it was easier for us to get together and choose things. But it's still one of the highlights of my career. So I would invite anybody to think about that, whether you're the social worker or the IRO, because it is fun and actually it works. That's all I wanted to say.
I think that's amazing. I think that's so good. And for me, when we talk about social work, I wish sometimes it was more things like that because, again, that's a memory for that young person that will probably live with them for a lifetime. So I think that's really, really good. Well done. Hey, we're heading towards the end of our time for today. In the chat, I'm just going to put a link to a feedback form I've put together. It helps us greatly with our work when we get feedback. So please do take a couple of minutes to fill that out. I really hope you've enjoyed the session today. I've been on a real journey in terms of putting it together, and it's been really enjoyable. So thanks a lot. I want to say a massive thank you to Natasha for making this happen, because I think it's been really powerful, the discussions we've had. And I'll pass over to you for perhaps a closing word.
I was just putting something in the chat about being able to buy things online, because I'm mindful we are the southeast region, so not all areas are as diverse as others, and some may struggle to find, for example, Scotch bonnet at their local supermarket. Although, was it you, James? We were online doing a Google search to see if you could buy Scotch bonnet, and actually even Amazon now
Sainsbury's, you
do.
can get it,
Yeah.
Yeah, and Amazon Fresh as well.
Yes. So we did find you can have a look online. So just encouraging you to to give it a try. And I think thank you so much, James, because the two dishes that you chose, saltfish fritters, which actually that's children of all ages could really enjoy that. And you could even, if you really wanted to, get the frozen pre-cut up onions and and just lay it all out in dishes for your children to kind of just throw into a bowl and mix together and get very messy and use it in that sensory kind of play way as well. But I'm so excited about our sessions that we've had, and it's our last one next week. I'm so sad that it's the last one already, and we are blessed to have the facilitator for next week's session on the call with us now. So I don't know, Jen, would you like to take a moment just to let people know what's coming next week, or would you like to hold them in suspense?
I think I'll hold you in suspense, but no. Hi, so I'm doing next week, and next week again on that whole theme of identity, but really looking at a bit more about dress and culture as well. So it's the same sort of theme. I'll be picking up some of the things that you spoke about, James. So it's a great little weave in into next week. So I look forward to seeing as many of you on there as possible. And obviously, if there's anything specifically that you want me to address, maybe just ping something over to Natasha and I can weave that into the presentation. Thanks, Tasha.
Thank you so much, Jen. And I know, I mean, we've got a few more minutes that I will stay online. You can put into the chat here if next week's session is to look specifically around language and cultural or traditional dress. But if there's anything in particular that you'd like Jen to touch on, Jen is an absolute wealth of knowledge around culture. You're absolutely brilliant, Jen.
There won't be any cooking, so I definitely think you trumped me, James. There's no cooking involved at all. Thank you.
I know there's some things coming into the chat about, yes, the recordings will be available for next week as well. Hopefully Jen will be happy for us to record her as well. And so that will be available on our YouTube channel. You'll be able to see it. So please don't worry if you are not able to make it, you won't miss out. But we do hope to have as many of you on the call as possible. And please do feel free to share this widely with colleagues. Although we are focusing on supporting our global majority children that are looked after in care, we know that by building a culturally competent workforce, our children are going to benefit. And even if it means that the staff member that's coming to the session actually works in a totally different area, them having cultural competency in wherever they work will help to contribute to a workforce that is sensitive to the needs of all of our children. So in one way, shape or form, everyone will benefit. So I have no issues with you widely sharing the invite. If you know of anybody that would particularly interested in becoming a foster carer, then please do get them to also sign up to these sessions, because I think helping people to grow in their knowledge of looking after children in care is a really important part of making a decision on whether to become a foster carer as well, and also for them to have an experience of the type of support that is available to them, because this environment is a supportive environment. It's one where we learn and we share together and we grow together. So on that, I shall stop recording, and then if there is anybody that would like to say anything, please do stay on the line, because I'll stay on with you for a little while.
Thank you very